So my intention for this interview is to utilize women in the community. There's been a handful of women that I'm interviewing to create an opportunity for shared knowledge and to support one another in not only our personal healing paths, but bringing that into our professional practices. And my work with you has inspired this interview and the opportunity to ask the question as if I have no knowledge of who you are and what you do. And so my primary question that seems to allow for a beautiful narration without a back and forth is, who is Dina? Mm-hmm. And if you could pronounce your last name. I was going to say your last name, but
Sure.
How do you pronounce your last name?
Saalisi.
Saalisi.
So I'm Dina Saalisi.
So who is Dina Saalisi? And the inspiration for this question is one of the women I interviewed used the phrase, my business, I am my business.
Okay.
And that was in the framework of one conversation we were having, but what it inspired was that practice of expressing who we are oftentimes is what lent to the work in the world that we're doing, right, and how we share that. So
great. Well, thank you, Vanessa. So who is Dina Saalisi? Well, I would say above all else, I see myself as an artist. And so that's interesting to put my life in terms of art, because what I do with others, I meet one-on-one, I do healing sessions, I teach classes, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm all these different roles. But I think for me, it all comes down to living life artfully. And so what that means to me is, well, I wake up early every day and I have several practices that I do that sort of kind of bring me back to self, like who am I today, right? And so in being an artist, we can kind of create who we are in each moment even. And so that's a big one. And I find that to be a really big one for most people and for mostly women. Because being in a female body, being of the feminine essence, many, if not most of us, were really sort of directed how to be. And a lot of our will was suppressed. And so for me, what that means is really tapping into getting to know who I am each day. It's going to be different. And so there's there's one practice that I'm thinking of that I like to do, and it's really about manifesting desire. And just even that phrase seems a little bit loaded because we tend to think of desire when we hear the word, it's sort of connected to like a sexual urge or something like that, or it seems frivolous, so what I desire, might be selfish. But really, it's the essence of who we are. And the thing that I find fascinating about desire is that it changes all the time. So much like, who am I? So this is why this ties in, because that's changing all the time too. I mean, who I am today is different than who I was yesterday, is different from a year ago, 10 years, 30 years ago, 50 years ago. And so I think that tying into really trying to understand what the desire is in each moment and embracing it, that there's no shame around it. And it's the thing about desire and will and sort of where we are in the feminine is that, how can I put this without using the word should? We omit the word should from our vocabulary. So many of us really are kind of going about life with what we feel we should be doing, and really kind of living by others' wills. And so some of that, comes into play. Sure, you have a job and you have to do what your boss wants, or you're a parent and you have to really attend to your children. But I think the more we're able to ground in each moment about what our desire, what our needs are, then the more we're able to give to others. Right? So who is Dina Saalisi? I'm an artist. I'm an energeticist, and this is a word I love to use because I feel like it's underused. Because I really love to tune into the subtle energy in the world. And that, flowers are like my main subtle energy that I love to tune into. But also meeting with others the way I do, really, I feel like what I'm doing is I'm not, healing you. What I'm doing is I'm connecting with you on a subtle energetic level so that you can work towards healing yourself. So sort of kind of what we talked about at the beginning of our conversation that wasn't on tape was about inspiration, right? That when we feel connected to and inspired by others, that helps us to grow. Well, that's energy. And that's what that is. And so I love to be an energeticist. So what more can I say about
that? That is, I love the way that question works. It's always perfect, if there's such a thing, because I feel it allows you a stream of consciousness that can flow. Right. And then the information really feels presence to this moment. One of the other questions, how did you become clear? I imagine part of it was as you lived into this artful way of being and living, that you discovered the truer path to your highest potential, which is what I see. That's how I narrate it. This connecting with people and the world around you in the subtle energy field. How did you become aware of that, and it being such a true path for you in your life?
Right. Well, it's interesting because I was just talking with some friends earlier today about I feel like when I was younger, for most of my life, this is just kind of how I am, how I was always really kind of connected to the subtle energy, which sort of made me like a little bit of like a fearful child, like an introvert, where I didn't really, I was the kid at the party like this because the energy was just too much. And do I fit in? Where do I belong with all of it? And then as I got older, I think that, when I started along this particular path of the healing arts, and now really in the last 3 years, really being more vocal and more in the open about what it is I'm doing, writing a lot and teaching, I think at the beginning of that, I thought, oh, well, yeah, I can just show up and everybody gets it. But it took me a little bit to realize that not everybody does get it. And so that's part of like being on a particular path when you're passionate about it, or for myself, when I'm passionate about it, I just think, everybody's passionate about it in the same way. And so that's kind of been a lesson for me of just like, there is space to kind of just understand that I can show up as I am. And not everybody is like me, is going to get it, but that I have a gift to offer. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of bringing it full circle into like seeing it as a gift that I can offer rather than just, do I fit in or don't I fit in?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then would you say the inspiration around teaching has been to cultivate possibly a common language and building that mutual understanding with people, or to maybe reveal what it is that your experience is of energy?
Well, that's a good question. And I think
versus having just kept your practice because taking it to that level of teaching and working in groups is, you know, especially having been maybe someone who was introverted for part of your life, that's a big step. So I guess my question is, what was the nudge towards that, the teaching component of your practice?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because you're right, it's sort of like an expansion of the one-on-one. I think it's partly what you spoke of you know, creating community. Like, finally, here I am with people who are like-minded and who want the knowledge that I have to offer. So how great that then I can be in a community of like-minded people. So, you know, it feeds me as much as it feeds others, right? Mm-hmm. So it's sort of a give and take. I also think, though, that I see a power in healing as a group. You know, many years ago, when I was really in the middle of healing from my own childhood where I was sexually abused, I would say the greatest learning for me in my healing was being part of a women's circle. And there were 6 of us that met every week for 2 years. And it's interesting because of these 6 women, you know, they're not like people I would like hang out with, you know, outside of group. We all were so different, had different stories, but we shared this commonality of having suffered this childhood abuse. And then being able to come together in this way as a group and share our stories and bear witness to one another was, you know, some of the most profound healing I've ever had in my life. And so I think what I noticed was that, you know, sitting with people one-on-one and really helping them get to the heart of their journey is extremely powerful. But then when you sit in a group, and you've had this experience of sitting in one of my groups, it's like times 100. It just really takes off because now there's more people bearing witness to your story, and you're hearing echoings of your story, and somehow you don't feel so alone anymore. And so it really was this burning desire to want to bring people together and catalyze the healing even more. It's like I saw really an energetic power in, like, you know, the strength in numbers type thing.
Yeah, and through my experience of that circle that we were in, the group we were in, is that it really offered everyone to see their power.
Right.
That it wasn't necessarily, we needed you to be the one willing to hold this space initially. And then what I observed was then once we all had made that commitment, the space was held mutually, which when I zoom out, I see how beneficial that practice is on any level for humanity at this time. Learning how to come into a group context and check ego a bit and sit down and really find your seat in that group, and your gift for facilitating that really offers people, it really offered people that opportunity to step in whatever way they were comfortable with. If they needed to be invisible, if they needed to maybe one time have a lot of face time and communication, it seems like there was this natural balance. And I think that was probably came from the intent that you set initially with your desire, back to the word desire, a clear desire for what you wanted and what your intentions were, and really cultivating that experience for yourself and for everyone. Right. And then it's paying it forward in a sense, because now there's that information and that energetic moved out from us in that experience. So in terms of, because I am very curious about the group setting, and it really resonates with some things that I'm exploring, how do you see the invitation? How do we create an invitation that will really serve that purpose? I guess, what is your process? And because you've practiced this a few times, and I'm imagining, because I know you're doing teaching in different facets, what is your process in that creating that invitation that really feels like, because we're talking about subtle energy, the invitation itself is the embodiment of the beginnings, the seed for that journey and that change and that healing and that growth. What could you speak to that process?
So are you asking me about like how I become inspired?
It can start there. Yeah. I mean, where an idea comes from for a specific group, or it could be even just logistical of okay, I know I want to do this group, and then this is
right.
What I found is helpful in terms of the invitation part.
So I think that's interesting, because I think it all kind of, the seed starts with my one-on-one client work. So, it's interesting too that I feel like healing comes in energetic waves. Like one week I can sit with 6 clients and they all have similar stories. The next week it's a different story that all the clients have. Mm-hmm. And so it's interesting. Yeah, there's mm-hmm. some energy working there. So the seed is always like, I hear back what people speak about. And, so like the will is one thing that we're talking about, and I like to call it divine will. And so that's been a big topic for many of my clients lately, of just feeling like, wow, I really just want to be able to tune into what it is that I want and my needs, and still be able to be loving in my relationships, but take care of me first, And so the seed is always coming from these stories that I hear. And I'm always moved and I'm always impressed that I have people come to me who have this self-awareness that they're either already beginning with or they're, wanting to activate. So that's part of it too, is it's like I'm always looking for seeds of self-awareness that are coming up. And then from there, I'm always inspired to like, oh yeah, I have a great idea. And then the great ideas usually revolve around different flower essences that speak to the soul journey. So like, for instance, we're talking about will. And so there's like 3 or 4 essences that I tend to hone in on that work with will. And so then from there, I kind of build it out. So yeah, does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And then, with the hydrangea group that we did, that was, that was a study of hydrangea. And so that was by invitation, more or less. And, but when I'm trying, when I want to teach a class, it really is just about, what I hear. So the seeds of self-awareness that pop up, and just kind of showing up with it and offering to be able to transmute the challenges around it. Mm-hmm. So that's why, I love working with the essences, because to me that gives me like an archetypal foundation for working with, say, will, or, whatever you're working with. Then you can kind of like tune into the different flowers that speak to that. And that's a really nice basis. Like, I haven't found anybody who doesn't appreciate, talking about it through the lens of flowers. And again, that's just a type tool, right? There's many different ones. There's Enneagram, there's horoscope, there's all these different typology tools. This is the one that I use, but everybody seems to really resonate with it. So again, it's like, I think being in nature too, just going out into nature incredibly inspires me. And I always get great insights and inspirations for really utilizing this power, subtle energy that we're all able to connect with as humans. Absolutely. And so there it is. It's like, then from there, it just kind of has a life of its own. Mm-hmm. And that's the other thing, is I try not to overthink all of it. I try not to get caught up in my head, because that's when it kind of comes to a halt, because then self-doubt can come in and all this other stuff. So I just kind of try to drop down into my heart and offer it with my heart.
That's incredible. I think I'm really glad that you touched on that towards the end, because there is that piece, I think, for humans that we get ahead of ourselves, and then we don't realize that it's actually we're in our way by creating these limitations of we want it all to be perfect in order oftentimes to bring something forward or to feel comfortable making an offering. And what I'm hearing is that you have an idea, and then there's also within that, there's room for what blossoms out of that idea.
Yeah.
Rather than feeling a need to be too specific that then can kind of dampen down on the experience, the energy. We know that energy likes fluidity, and that then that's what people are feeling in your, I would imagine people are feeling in your group offerings, is this way to know what they're stepping into, and also a little bit of curiosity and intrigue, because it's not necessarily, oh, I know what she's going to talk about.
Right.
Which I imagine is really allows for, even if you were to teach the same class over and over and over again, for it to remain really fresh, just like a flower. What you can bring in sweet peas to no end, and they will continue to inspire something new. And so I like that analogy to the potential of the way that you're bringing forward your classes.
And I guess that speaks to that, the ideas and the inspirations, it's like they're just kind of coming through me, right? They're not mine. Mm-hmm. And so that's another part of the energetic flow, is just allowing it to just surface and rise up, and then seeing where it'll go. And you're absolutely right that I could teach, the same class to two different groups, and it's completely different, the same outline, and it's different. And that says a lot about just how everybody's pathway to healing is a little different. Mm-hmm. And so being able to have that fluidity and have the spontaneity come up, that's the key.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when you were talking about the ideas moving through you, it inspired. So this will be great. I will ask you the question my father just asked me. So my father is in the advancing stages of Parkinson's. And the time that I visited this summer for a family reunion, we had a brief moment where I was able to drop in with him and offer him a little bit of an experience of what, I didn't talk very much. I just said, do you want to play with me? And he was incredibly receptive. And I think he came back and he said, wow, I really want to know more about that. And I think I need to just spend some more time with it. And then this next time that I visited, so we were maybe going to work together distantly. He lives up in Bellingham, Washington. And I caught on to the energetic that he wanted to be rescued and he wanted to be healed, and he would take as much as he could get. And it didn't feel healthy for us at that time. So I had to disengage. Then this time I was just visiting last month. He asked me, how do you heal people? How would you heal me? Well, he didn't say, how would you heal me? But that's what I heard. That happens for me sometimes, is I can hear what somebody is really asking me. And then I explained it very simply and very shortly. Well, actually, it's not me healing you. When I get out of the way and can allow it to move through me. And that was when I kind of saw, then he wanted to know then what is it? Well, then who's in charge? He wanted to know who was in charge, which I find fascinating because Parkinson's is related to a need for control. Yeah. And so could you speak to, pretend like I'm my dad and I'm asking you, Dina, tell me what is moving through you? I need to understand how the energy or the idea or the healing is moving through you and offering itself to another on their own unique, as you just ended with, their own unique path to healing. Yeah. In healing.
Right. So I think what's moving through is a desire to understand what your deepest challenge is. So I always start with, when I'm working with somebody, I want to know about the pain. I want to know about the suffering. And I don't come out and ask, so what are you suffering from? But just my presence, they know that they can talk about that. And that's really where the deepest healing is going to come from, is being able to touch the pain, feel safe enough to share it, and embrace it, really own it. That, the mainstream model of health and well-being is really more about getting rid of, we don't want to have aches and pains. We don't want to have trauma. We don't want to have anything that feels bad. We want to, numb ourselves. So we do that with alcohol, drugs, food, sex, movies, you name it. There's a million ways to numb ourselves. And so I think what's moving through me is trying to help people to touch the pain, touch the darkness, and feel okay with it. I have many techniques that I use, and really love it to the point of it loses its power, its control over you. So in that way, you become empowered. You rise up and you become empowered as your own healer. And then from then on, when the challenges come up, which we're always going to have challenges because we're human beings, you're able to kind of honor it and not just try to look away from it and ignore it and numb it. It's really about loving it. So bringing loving acceptance to the dark parts in order to heal it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think my sense is in observing, having done a lot of my personal work, observing my father, I really feel like oftentimes what is required is for people to be on that precipice of where that model of what we've culturally seen as looking at the symptoms and alleviating ourselves of the symptoms without ever asking ourselves what they were communicating. Yeah. And what is this language of the body. And then it's this healing crisis occurs where none of that is working anymore, So for the example of my father, the way that the medication works is it tricks your body into believing that it's producing dopamine. So it is not a long-term solution. It's a short-term gain because you can eliminate the things that make your day-to-day life challenging. You can control your body without ever asking why your body is requiring you to lose control and what gift is there. And he is getting the download, like the divine will is on him. I mean, I felt it so incredibly in all of his questions. I mean, raised very Catholic and claim he's an atheist his whole life and touched into Buddhism for a blink to navigate some trauma short term. And now it's kind of, if this is possible, then imagine. And I think maybe I'm not as scared now, so he's really opening up to it. And so I have such curiosity of how can there be a bridge? I see a bridge, but maybe that's not the right language, but I'm going to say it anyway, where as we become more aware of what is possible, how can we communicate that in a way so that people can hear it before then? Does that make sense? It doesn't. Let me try and... I'm wondering what's in the way. You touched on this process of the first thing is asking people to touch into maybe what's in their way or where they're suffering. Yeah. And how can we bring that into the common conversation, I guess, is where it doesn't require people to be, nothing else has worked. Okay, now I'm willing to maybe go talk to this woman that my friend saw because they had these amazing results, and maybe it'll work for me.
So are you suggesting that it could be more universally accepted?
Yeah, it's the bridge.
Right,
How
right.
is it not a part of the common conversation, and how yeah, I mean, I guess we're still getting the download of that, and maybe there's some purpose that it's serving that it's not.
Well, I think you brought up a good point about the healing crisis, right? That anybody who works in the healing arts knows this phenomenon of the healing crisis. And really, I think probably 9 times out of 10, the reason people either come to healing, to deep, real, true healing, or become healers is because of healing crisis. Mm-hmm. So I don't think you can get there without that.
It's an initiation.
Yeah. And I think that it is what healing is. So this is what we're saying. Mm-hmm. We're saying that to be able to touch the darkness, to be able to really tune into it. And that doesn't mean that you have to, spend 6 months in bed where you don't get out of bed and you feel miserable. It's about really noticing that you feel bad. Mm-hmm. And so that's back to the not numbing part. Yeah. So it's giving yourself enough space to notice, wow, this really feels bad. You don't have to know why. And I tell people all the time, you don't have to have specific memories of this ... happened to me and this is why I'm suffering. All you have to do is have some awareness of the suffering. So once you have awareness, then anything's possible. So yeah, oftentimes though, you do need kind of somebody to guide you, or a group. That's, mm-hmm. I mean, support groups are amazing. I mean, look at AA, you know what I mean? It's like the most renowned support group of all time. Mm-hmm. And people heal. They heal from their addictions because they have that support.
Yeah. So kind of along that thread, but maybe taking it in a different way, have you, in your practice, come in contact with maybe some possible bridges with this being part of the integrative healing health care system with the Western model? I think we see it more in Santa Cruz because we're in a kind of a unique place. Right. And what does that, if so, what did that look like where, because here I am doing the infinity symbol. Yeah. Wouldn't it be beautiful if there was movement between the two models? Because we understand that the Western model serves a certain level of trauma that potentially is necessary in that moment. You need an intervention. Right. There's no doubt about it. Right. And yet, if we want to look at long-term health and well-being, how can we get that energy flowing in that direction? And maybe I know we're at the beginnings of what feels like the traditional coming back into the focus, because the Western model is seeing the revolving door. And some practitioners are becoming more honest that ethically it doesn't feel good, and that it is about money, and money's ruling the roost. And so, I guess when I was seeing your group settings, and I got inspired of kind of the meeting of the minds kind of thing, of what would it look like just to approach that conversation with a group of, medical minded practitioners. And then,
well, I think, so I have 2 answers. So on the energetic level, I think that really the time we're in right now is a really exciting time, because we're, I think we're having a feminine consciousness rising. This is like the 4th wave of feminism coming up now. And I see it. I have, my daughter who's almost 14. I'm just blown away with the way she's able to articulate and stand up for herself as a female, and just in ways that, gosh, I never would have. Mm-hmm. And so the times they are changing. Mm-hmm. And I think that this is a really important point, because again, with energy, we're all made up of feminine and masculine energy. That's the yin yang symbol. And interestingly, when we see the yin yang symbol, it's perfectly balanced. But that's sort of what we're trying to achieve. That isn't what our experience as human beings is, right? So, we could say that, the patriarchy came into power, and when it did, it destroyed the goddess culture. I mean, that's just historically a fact. And then we could even go into talking about, the witch burnings, where really millions of mostly women were killed for being healers and property owners. This is also historical. And so I feel like that lives in our unconscious memory, and it's coming back around. And again, it takes a long time, but we're seeing ripples of that. So that's sort of on the energetic level, what's going on. But then on the practical level, there is a real bridge that's being built between the medical establishment and say the health and well-being community. And so what that is it's health coaching, really, because the certification that I just recently got is a national board certification. It's given by the National Board of Medical Examiners. And what happened was, and it's like about 3 years old, I think. And what was happening was the doctors were seeing patients, and they couldn't ignore anymore that there was this mind-body continuum, and that our emotions definitely govern our bodies. And so they were seeing patients, but they weren't really knowing how to work the mind-body part. And so they came up with this idea of we're going to start certifying health coaches, so that now they can send their patients to the health coach to get sort of the emotional support they need in order to whatever manage their diet and whatever it is that the patient needs. So we are kind of seeing that bridge now. That's so great. It's really an exciting time.
I meant to ask you about your recent certification. Wow, that's amazing. So then does that allow people to submit their expenses with you through their insurance? Has it made that leap yet?
Right. So I don't work for a doctor, so me personally, no. But they are. But a lot. I would say most medical offices are starting to hire health coaches.
That's
so
great.
They can have
the because that really is coming up for a lot of people that I've communicated with, and a lot of what I see out in the world is this. I can get a $5 prescription.
Right.
Or that's not, that therapy is not covered by my insurance. Right. And, I like to stay an optimist, and I agree these are very exciting times that we're living in. I really feel that way. And a lot of the shadow that you spoke of within ourselves, we're seeing collectively, and it's really intense. Yeah. It's really intense to kind of see full spectrum. Okay, humanity, this is what we're really working with, and it's not going away. It's being churned up, and it's getting put in our faces. So it feels very appropriate that the timing of this group movement, that yourself and other people and this building of a community and its awareness, and how expansive that can be. When we talked about our little small group, exponentially launching out from that little nucleus, then imagine everyone who walks out of one of your classes and who they're going to interact with, and on and on and on. So that really feels very powerful and poignant in the times.
Yeah, it's growing for sure.
So I feel really complete. I'm always so I love this process and how it really, there's so much, and we could go on and on and on, but for the sake of this interview, I feel complete. And if there's anything that you want to add or close with?
Well, I just want to say that I really appreciate, I'm sitting here with Vanessa Wehner. You can't see her, but she is a healer in our community in Santa Cruz. And I just feel very fortunate to be able to sit with you and to be able to speak my truth. So thank you, Vanessa.
I'm grateful as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Nice.
Isn't that fun?